On live broadcast. How are you, Avi?
All right. How are you doing, Yocheved? I am so glad to be here with you guys. How's everybody doing?
Everybody is doing well. Hope you and your family are well.
Yep. Thank God we're doing okay.
Good.
I'm looking forward to having this very important conversation with you today. I know before this live, we actually put out a poll. You put out a poll to ask the people what you guys want to hear from us today.
Right.
Last week, we got a lot of messages and responses. And based on what we were talking about last week's live, if you haven't seen our conversation last week, it was about building our own self-esteem and self-confidence.
Just give
And
me
some
one
of the
second, Avi. I just want to shut off the air. Hold on.
sure,
There we go. Now I can hear you better. Okay.
sure. Some of the questions that were coming in when we were talking about building boundaries and kind of working on your self-esteem and self-confidence, some of the questions were coming, yeah, but how do we do this when it comes to a spouse, with a person that we love, the person that we're supposed to live with? How do we assert ourselves? How do we set these boundaries? So we actually put out a poll today, and a lot of you guys wanted to hear about setting healthy boundaries. So, Yocheved, what are your thoughts about this topic?
But I think we specifically said setting healthy boundaries with toxic family
Family
members.
members.
I
Oh,
think
yes.
that's what makes it very, in a way, tough because
Yeah.
you don't really want to set boundaries because these are the people who are closest to you, and we're raised and taught that we're supposed to be close to our family members. So it's
It's
not
not even,
something that we want to do initially, for sure not.
yeah, it's not even about not that we don't want to set the boundaries. A lot of people think that they're not allowed to set boundaries with close people, family members, children, and spouses. And this is where the biggest misconception is. When we set boundaries with every single person in our life. With everyone, we set a boundary. And sometimes that can be very shocking. What do you mean? I'm your brother, I'm your mother, I'm your father, I'm your wife, I'm your husband, I'm your child. How do you set these boundaries, right? And once we're going to have this conversation today, it's going to make a lot more sense. So what are your thoughts about this topic, Yocheved?
Well, define for me what a boundary is.
Yeah, I constantly say this. I give the best example. I find that it works, and this is why I keep saying it over and over again. The reason we have a front door in our home is to keep people away from entering our house that we don't want to be there, right? So, for example, if you don't want to have a conversation with your coworker about your spouse, for example, in the workplace, sometimes people say, "Oh, how's your wife doing? How's your husband doing? How's this?" And a lot of the times, even in HR, they make sure to talk about setting healthy boundaries and not talking about your personal stuff at work, right? There's a very important reason for that. Or, for example, when you have friends, sometimes this is a big one. Friends will want to know and ask you personal, intimate questions about your relationship with your spouse, and that can be a problem. Many spouses don't like that their significant other is sharing all their stuff with their friends, and that's inappropriate, right? That's not respecting personal boundaries. Or even, for example, children, when young children ask inappropriate questions of their parents, and that shouldn't be, that's inappropriate boundaries. For example, if let's say mom and dad are going out for a dinner date, or they're
Mm.
going to do something fun, and the children are saying, "Where are you going? I want to come with you. How come I cannot go? That's not fair. You don't love me," right? Setting a healthy boundary is supposed to say, "Now is mommy and daddy time. We were with you today all day, or you were in school and we had some fun earlier, but now it's time for mommy and daddy." "But where are you going? I also want to go." "That's not fair. It's mommy and daddy time." You do not have to tell your children, you do not have to explain to your children every little detail of your own personal, intimate life with your spouse. And a lot of the times, parents don't realize that they have that authority. or even with their parents. If you're a married child, and you have parents and your parents are asking you, where are you going? What did you eat? What did you do? How come this is like this? Just set that boundary up. And it's 100% absolutely very important for you to do that in order to live a healthy, happy, well-balanced life. What are your thoughts?
So my thoughts are, from what I understand, boundary is basically allowing yourself to realize that you're allowed to not share everything and you're allowed to hold certain things private. Is that what a boundary is? I just want to make sure that everybody understands the proper definition of it.
Absolutely. Even from your spouse. Now, let me give you an example, a personal example, and then you
That's
can tell me,
tricky.
and then you'll tell me a boundary that you set up for yourself. I'm very much into my electronics. I love electronics, and I have this thing when people get into my electronics, I feel like something is going to get messed up, right? That's just my own personal stuff. Now, my laptop, for example, my computer. Well, first of all, I have a lot of private information there because I work with people and there's a lot of files there. So that's not, nobody's allowed to access that, right? So even people in my home know, and my laptop has a password and it's closed, right? So they know they cannot access that because there's a boundary there, right? That's not appropriate for somebody else to come and ask. And I say them, even the people that I love, even the people who are closest to me, I'm so sorry, I cannot let you use it because there's private information on it. And that's the end of the conversation. A lot of times children, this is a big one, parents complain that their children take their phones and use their phones to watch videos, and then the parents say, yeah, but if I try to take away my phone from my child is going to go crazy. I'm not going to be able to deal with my child. So I just give them the phone just so they can be quiet, right? Different things like that. What are your thoughts?
So let me ask you let me ask you a general scenario. Let's kick off a scenario. Let's say you have, I know everybody's going to come at me like, oh my God, we're starting with this again. But since it's like a family related situation, it's not a personal situation. It's like, I think a lot of people can relate to situation. Let's say you and your mother-in-law or father-in-law are having a relationship where there's tension. And you don't want to be interfering with the relationship between your husband or your wife and their parents. But at the same time, if the in-laws are coming, it interferes with how you discipline your children or how you have your priorities in the house set up or the way that you communicate with your spouse because they're around, the spouse acts a certain way. Now, how do you formulate a boundary, still respecting them, but also at the same time protecting your own relationship with your spouse?
Yeah. That's a huge question, and there are so many components to what you just asked. There are so many different levels to answer, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I want to just give a disclaimer. We're doing a live on Facebook, okay? That means we're speaking very generally. There are many different type of scenarios that are different, and this is why I say this live is not in replacement of therapy. We're talking about very important topics, but it's not in replacement. So whatever we talk about here, take with a grain of salt and understand that every single family dynamic is different. But based on what you asked, I will answer you. If, let's say, you and your spouse have kids and grandparents are going to come over, grandparents usually, right, again, I'm making a general statement, usually are coming from a place of love, right? They want to give their advice. A lot of the times grandparents usually don't have anybody at home, so they're in that emptiness syndrome where they don't have anyone to teach and anyone to give over. And developmentally speaking, that's where they are holding. They want to give over their knowledge. They want to share. Now, a lot of the times, daughter-in-laws or son-in-laws will take that and internalize that in a way to say that, what does she think? I don't know what I'm doing? Who does she think she's teaching? I know better than her, or I know better than him, right? And vice versa. But really, if we learn to empathize and say, listen, this person, they have nobody at home. They just want attention, especially the seniors. They're constantly going to say stuff because they just want to feel heard. And that's where emotional availability comes from. Unfortunately, a lot of people are not emotionally available. So as soon as the grandparents or the in-laws come to the home and say something, right away we get irritated, we get annoyed because we think that they're just trying to correct us. But in reality, they just want to be heard. Now, again, I'm going to say this disclaimer again. Every single case is different. Now, if you can take what they say with a grain of salt and just say, I hear you. By saying I hear you doesn't necessarily mean you are agreeing with what they're saying. But just to be able to have a peaceful environment at home. When the dinner is over, when the day is over, they're going to pack up their stuff and they're going to leave, and you're going to be back with your spouse, you're going to be back with your kids, and the routine will continue. Now, in a situation where you feel that these grandparents or these in-laws come in and it now begins to ruin the dynamic and the relationship between you and your spouse and the relationship between you and the kids, that's when then you have a deeper conversation and you analyze, okay, let's look at the pattern. Every single time your mom comes, this is what we're dealing with afterwards. Or every single time your family comes over, your sister-in-law comes, your sister comes over, this and this happens, then we're dealing with all this stuff. And it's ruining our relationship, it's ruining the kids, it's ruining all of this. What are we doing here? What are your thoughts?
So that's very important what you're saying. But I also think, in addition to what you're saying, like you said, sometimes it's our own misinterpretation of what's being said to us or our own feelings towards a certain person. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say I don't like my brother-in-law to begin with, or I don't like my sister-in-law to begin with. Whether they did something wrong or not, if my general in general, I just baseline is I don't like this person. Whatever this person is going to do, I am not going to like. Okay. The presence of this person is going to be enough to say, oh my God, get them out of here because I don't like them. So a lot of times when we determine our relationship with somebody, we have to really deeply think of it. Like, is this person really bad? Or is it my perception of this person? I just don't like this person. And because I don't like this person, whether they are making more money than I am in their career, whether they are more successful, whether they are more, they have, they're more beautiful, or people like them more, whatever the situation may be, sometimes our bias towards that person interferes with the family dynamics. Now, in that case, is it really a right thing to do boundaries? Because you don't like this person, but it's because of your personal reasons. Now the whole family, which is the children, the cousins, the husband, the brothers, the whole family now has to struggle in a way because of your own personal baseline of not liking that person. So I think there has to be a lot of really like thinking to ourselves, is it us that needs to change? Or is it really the other person that needs to change?
Yeah, you're asking a very important question, and that really comes from a place of maturity and a person being able to take responsibility. Now, every single person that's walking this planet has baggage that they're dealing with. Every single person has something going on in their life, right? Some people are aware of their stuff that they need to deal with, and some people are completely either in denial or it doesn't even come into their radar that they have low self-esteem, that they feel worthless, that they feel intimidated, that they have all this stuff that they need to work on. So like you said, when this brother-in-law or when this sister-in-law comes into the house and they get that sense of that rush, that feeling inside, they immediately project and they think their sister-in-law or brother-in-law or in-laws are so bad, but in reality, it's their own insecurities that are coming up. So possibly that's a perfect opportunity to say, why is it that every single time my sister-in-law, every single time my brother-in-law, why is that every time they come, I feel so intimidated? What is this? What is that inner feeling really telling me? Am I insecure? Am I unhappy with the way I look? Am I unhappy with how much money I make? So that's really coming from how we feel, right? Now, what if it's the flip side, right? What if every time they come, they put us down? If they put us down and they're toxic for us, that's a different conversation. But here we're talking about projection. When we have our own negative thoughts about ourselves and we're intimidated and someone makes us intimidated, and because of that, we don't like that feeling, that's actually an excellent opportunity for us to look at ourselves and say, what do I need to work on? How do I build my emotional availability to be able to be in the same room as this person, and also not to give that person so much power to make us feel so uncomfortable. It's time to take back the power and be completely okay being in the room with that person that makes us feel uncomfortable.
Well, the reason I bring that particular situation up is because, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately with a capital U, people are quick to set boundaries. As I'm all for boundaries. I'm all for, you know what, if somebody's toxic, like you said, if somebody's really making you feel miserable, you have to be able to protect your inner self first, take care of yourself first. But unfortunately, if people don't change, don't acknowledge that they need to change themselves, and the first thing is, well, you know what, I don't like this person, I'm going to make sure that we don't invite them, we eliminate all relationships, my husband's not going to go there, my mother-in-law's not going to come to me, I'm not going to let my children play with their cousins. If we're going to right away form boundaries as opposed to really thinking, maybe I as a person need to change, we're going to say, hey, you know what? It's easy. The real solution is I got to separate from this. These people are toxic to me. We're going to have a lot of broken families, unfortunately. We're going to have a lot of families who are not going to go to each other's weddings. We're going to have a lot of families who are not going to celebrate birthdays together. We're going to have a lot of broken families. So when people listen to something like this, and this is why I'm specifically bringing this up, this type of a discussion is not to promote boundary as being your first line like defense system. It's really when all else fails and you really truly figured it out, this person is abusive, this person is destructive verbally, this person has a narcissistic character, they don't like you for whatever reason, when all else fails, that's when they need to already say, okay, now I got to form a boundary. But if you are the person who's watching and you are that person who tends to get jealous quickly or tends to really get intimidated at other people's success, and it's very, very, like, nobody wants to admit to something like that, you have to really take a step back and think to yourself, well, you know what, my own insecurities are projecting on my family's peace, on my family's dynamics, on my family's well-being. And if that's really what's happening, maybe you do need to go and talk to your inner self. Because, you know, Avi, what's really sad is when you get text messages of ladies texting you, and a lot of times it's not even the mother-in-laws. You know, you would think in a relationship with ladies, it would be their mother-in-laws who are toxic, quote unquote, right? Like stereotype. A lot of times the text messages that we get, it's between the sister-in-laws. And the question becomes, why is there such a tension between sister-in-laws? It could be the husband's sister who's getting involved. It could be the husband's brother's wife who's getting involved. And these type of relationship, because mother is not really, most likely not going to be jealous of a daughter-in-law. Mothers are more like, it's my son, I raised him, I'm looking out for him. They have like this very protective method. But between sister-in-laws or brother-in-laws, I don't know, maybe it's the same. This is where what I'm saying comes into play. It's almost like they are intimidated by each other. And then what happens is this boundary becomes into family separation. We're no longer doing it because of, let's form a healthy boundary. It becomes not a healthy boundary, it becomes a toxic boundary. Because we now intoxicated the entire family and broke up an entire family because of our own insecurities, of our own intimidation by other people, of our own, why is my husband not doing what her husband is doing? Why is my brother getting her so many presents like she doesn't deserve it? What does she do for him? You know, my brother is such a gem. She didn't deserve a husband like him. They become like the judge of the situation, like they're God, like they should know what matches to make. And then we have destruction. So as a therapist, I want to ask you, I'm not putting you on the spot, it's just, you know, it's a very common scenario which becomes very, very sad actually. As a therapist, I want to ask you, like, boundaries are good, but at what point are they toxic? and destructive, and not really for the health reasons and peace reasons?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and a lot of times people get that confused. They feel like when they set boundaries, they have to start now cutting off people from their life. And that's not the point of this. We have to recognize that because we're setting boundaries, because we want to have relationships with people, because we want to be connected. That's the reason we're setting boundaries. It's not about now cutting off people left and right and not wanting to talk to them anymore. It's because we want to have a long lasting, healthy relationship. And that's why we set those boundaries. So, for example, we have, let's say, a sister-in-law, right, that comes in and she's, let's say, involved in the couple's life, right? And this is, let's say, the wife's husband's sister, right? They have a relationship. They have a relationship. So the wife should not get involved in the relationship with her husband and his sister. Allow them to have their unit, whatever that may look like. If they want to spend time together, if they want to talk on the phone, that has nothing to do with how it relates to the wife. Now, sometimes in situations where that sister-in-law comes over for Shabbat, a holiday, or whatever it is, and then that's where there's a lot of tension, then that's a conversation that the wife and the husband can have and say, hey, do you notice when they come over, we're noticing this and this come up? And be able to assess it from that point. What are your thoughts, Yocheved?
I agree with that. And I also will say, in addition to that, if you really see, back to my point, if there is a situation in which you notice that there are sister-in-laws or brother-in-laws, or I don't know, I'm just naming the popular ones, that are the type to really get intimidated and really try to make your life miserable, if all else fails in you trying to make peaceful settlements with them, then I think for your own well-being, the best thing to do is really keep a distance. Not a distance, like Avi said, we're not here to promote destruction. We're here to understand that if you don't form that healthy distance at the right time, what's going to happen is there's going to end up being tension. There's going to end up being some sort of a blowout, and then it's going to be not a healthy distance. It's going to be a distance where two people cannot even sit at the same table. And I think, when we had this poll, Avi, a lot of people chose this particular topic. And that comes to show that this is a problem that's very, very common. Because if a lot of people are choosing this particular, that's why we decided today to make it in a poll as opposed to we choose the topic. When we're getting that people want to hear how do you deal with toxic family members, that means almost, or we could say in every family, there is a toxic family member. Now I'm going to ask you another question, and this is actually from one of the groups. I thought it was a very interesting question, and it's also going to relate to this healthy boundary situation. So we already spoke about the sister-in-laws. We gave them their moment. Now let's give a moment to the mother-in-laws, okay? And I'm not a mother-in-law, so I am not here to, I don't know how I'm going to act, so I'm not here to judge any mother-in-laws. But I really found this question to be quite entertaining, I have to say. Let's say, as a mother-in-law, I have a lot to say about this, by the way. You notice that your new daughter-in-law does not know how to cook. And your son is coming to your house to eat because your daughter-in-law doesn't know how to cook. At what point do you get involved? And at what point do you not mix in and say, this is between the husband and wife, and let them figure it out? And from the daughter-in-law's point of view, what is she supposed to do if she realizes that every time her husband goes to eat by the mother-in-law because she didn't cook, he comes home very, very mad and angry because obviously there was some sort of a conversation in that household that now made him against the wife? What would you do in that situation?
I just took a deep breath. What would I do in the situation in terms of what? Who am I working with? The couple? Am I working with a mother-in-law?
So let's first go to the mother-in-law. let's give her the benefit of the doubt, since I know we you know, a lot of times the mother-in-laws are somehow end up as the bad ones here. But let's say, as a mother-in-law, you realize that your son is not having dinner. What should you do? You care. It's your son. You feel for him. You don't want him to be hungry, and he's coming to you all the time to eat. So let's give her the benefit of the doubt. She's a loving mother. She's concerned. But at the same time, there's going to be a problem in that marriage. So what do?
Who says there's going to be a problem in that marriage? There are plenty of people that have wives that don't cook.
Well, I'm saying based on I said this is from a different group, right? So based on what I read, this particular in-law, mother-in-law or father-in-law is not happy. They're not happy that the son is coming. So we're not talking about somebody that's happy. They're not happy. So what would you do?
They have to deal with it. They don't have to be happy in that area. You know, this is the most interesting thing, is that we're constantly so afraid that we need to please people. Okay, so they're not happy. Moving forward, is it the husband that's not happy? Because if the husband is not happy, then that's a different conversation, right? Then that's a conversation he can talk with his wife and say, listen, you know, I would like for you to cook. And then being able for the wife to say why she isn't cooking. What's the reason why the wife is not cooking? Does she not know how to cook? Is she also working and coming home very late and it's very hectic and she just doesn't have time? Does she have, kids at home? Is she just not making it enough? Does she just not know? Some girls just don't know how to cook. So this is possibly maybe something that they can work on together. Now, if the mother wants her husband or her son to come to her house, that's fine. That's great. It'll give them an opportunity to bond and to talk. However, if their conversation becomes toxic, where the whole time he's there, the mother is telling her son, why isn't your wife cooking? She should be the one cooking. Then that's a problem. Of course, that's gonna affect the relationship tremendously. I would say in that kind of case, it seems like the mother-in-law just needs a little bit of guidance in terms of teaching her how her words are affecting her children. Another thing is, at that age, however old the child is, the son, 20, 30, 40, he has to know himself in terms of, you know, what he's doing with this relationship. This question has so many components to it. You know,
So I would take a difference. I would answer this differently for myself.
Go ahead.
At what point does the son have to keep coming back to his mother's house to eat?
Is this every night? I'm saying I don't.
This is why I specifically went back. This is why I asked this question. It wasn't about the fact that the lady doesn't know how to cook. That's a side point. The problem is when we start to form toxic relationships, sometimes we are to blame for the toxicity. Like, I'm a strong believer, and tell me if I'm wrong, I'm a strong believer that once a couple gets married, they need to stay married. Like, they need to avoid going to parents for everything that happens in their life. Oh, my wife didn't cook. Can I come to your house to eat? Why? Why is it important for you to share with your mother that your wife didn't cook? I mean, if I'm constantly going to call my mother, and I'm just throwing it out there, I'm making it up. Oh, my husband doesn't want to work anymore. He wants me to work. My husband doesn't want to work anymore. He wants me to work. If I'm constantly going to say something negative, and my mother is going to feel like, oh my God, my poor daughter, she's hustling. Her husband doesn't want to provide anymore. She's automatically going to develop negativity. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to talk about, this is a toxic relationship. So what do we have to do now? We have to now separate the mother-in-law from the situation. But let's understand how this situation became toxic to begin with. It became toxic because sometimes we overshare. Sometimes we over-involve parents and outsiders into our lives. Yeah. And when people start to get too involved in our lives, maybe that's the problem. Maybe when you decide to get married, and you know, for example, I'm going to go back to my early days of marriage. Not that I want to get personal, but just to kind of, so you can see where I'm coming from. When I got married, and I knew I have to go to school, for example, I had to go to college. I had 2 kids. It was not going to be an easy road. At that particular situation, the parents already knew that, hey, they're going to need some help here. Both parents were aware. So it's not going to be negative if we ask for help, because they're aware that this is a very temporary thing. I'm going to school. If I'm going to work and I'm earning money, I'm not really sure if I agree that this is going to be the same concept, because we're working, we're earning money. That does not mean that our spouse is now going to constantly go back to his mother's house, or she's going to go back to her mother's house and make it like a secondary home, because what's going to happen is there's going to be you spilling the beans of things that you're not supposed to. There's conversations that arouse. Your life becomes open book. And what makes marriage or relationships more valuable? When they're private. When everything is out in the open, we're giving people the ability to cause toxicity. And then it's a domino effect. So now we're going to have hate here. Now somebody's going to get mad, and we're going to have boundaries. What kind of boundaries? Negative boundaries, where families are going to be broken. So, like, as much as I really agree that boundaries are so important for our well-being, especially in abusive marriages, especially in abusive relationships, I also feel like maybe I'm just old-fashioned, I don't know, but I also feel like a lot of the stuff that happen can be prevented if people don't cause unnecessary tension.
Let me tell you this. There can also be, as you were speaking, this came to mind, there can also be resentment from the mother. Think about it this way. Let's say the mother is already older, and she's, let's say, by herself or with her husband, right? They live a certain type of lifestyle. Now, when the mother knows that her son is going to come from work and he's going to be hungry, and she has to prepare food for him, and she has to work for him and do something for every single day, the resentment will build up. And in her mind, she'll say, I don't understand. He has a wife. He has what is my daughter-in-law doing at home? Why isn't she making the meals? It's also going to take work on her end to constantly make food for the son. So
or not enable it, maybe.
Right. So she should be the one to set the boundary. Then say, son, I love you so much. If it's very hard for her, if she notices that it's difficult for her to make the food, she now has to go out of her way, because again, when it's only two people, your house is a certain type of way. But now when you're making food for your son, or when people come, you want to go a little bit of, extras, you do something extra, that sometimes you have to go out of your way. Sometimes a mother doesn't want to make a fancy dinner for her son. Sometimes she just wants to eat leftovers or just relax, and that builds resentment. And because of that, she's now upset and annoyed with her daughter. Again, when it happens once in a while, mothers would love to have their kids over. But we're talking about when it happens on a consistent basis, it builds and builds and builds and builds, and that's where resentment comes in. And that's why they say, where's my daughter-in-law? Is this man with disabilities? Interesting.
So Marina, I'm going to answer that one in a second.
So that's where the resentment comes in, and the mother-in-law, at that point, the mother-in-law needs to be aware and to say, my son, I love you very much, but I'm not going to be able to have you for dinner tonight. In the beginning, it might be very difficult because she will feel very unmotherly, if that's a word, right? So she'll say, tonight you have to go home, and he goes home, and that moment he will start to build his empire with his wife. And that means opening up a cookbook, watching a video on YouTube, learning how to make something, and that's how they're going to start their relationship, making dinner together, making it fun, and also checking in with the wife and trying to see, like, what's going on. Why isn't she making dinner? Where's the disconnect? What are your thoughts, Yocheved?
There's a lot I want to say. I'm going to try to hold stuff out so that I don't get anybody here, agitated. But
I kind of want to hear it though. What are you holding back on?
We're going to go to the girl side in a minute from what my perspectives are. And again, it's going to be probably different than most perspectives, but that's fine. Based on back to this particular topic, when you say the mother may not mind cooking, well, today it's going to be coming to eat there. Tomorrow, 5 years down the road, when there's an argument, that's going to be, well, I'm going to come to sleep here. Like, things are going to start off as little things in the beginning, and then they're going to become bigger and bigger with time. So parents who are getting children married off. Again, I'm not one of those yet, but from what I see, going forward, I mean, how I would want my children to be. I remember when I got married, there was a term that was used. There was like a phrase: once you get married, there's no way back. Of course, we're going to take our kids back if they're suffering, but it's like we have this Russian phrase, like once you get married, there's no way back. And when you go into marriage with that mentality in mind, you're going to be like, you know what, I got to suck things up. Like there are certain times in my life where things are not going to be given to me on a golden platter, where I will have a miserable day, where my husband may raise his voice at me because he came home from a bad day and I kind of pissed him off even more, or vice versa. And that too is a normal process of life. That too is that roller coaster of marriage where things are not always going to be picture perfect. Now let's go to this girl. Okay, I'm going to go to the side of the girl. Like I said, this one is not going to be, probably not going to be popular opinion, but that's okay because I'm going to share my opinion. We're going to go to the girl side, all right? The girl that doesn't cook. We were saying, why doesn't he learn how to cook? Why doesn't he learn how to cook? That's a really good question. Why doesn't he learn how to cook? But then why doesn't he learn how to, I don't know, wake up in the middle of the night and take care of the children and nurse them? Why doesn't he learn how to do the laundry? Why doesn't he learn how to mop the floors? Why doesn't he learn how to clean the bathrooms? I mean, we can argue this point with everything in life because it's like, I do it, he can do it. And that is great. That is really loving, and everybody should try to pitch in. But I was taught, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, and I said this is not going to be popular opinion, that and it's not because I'm old-fashioned, because I really grew up here in the States, that as a husband and wife, there is a certain level of respect. Like, there is a certain level of respect. We have a man do certain obligations, and then we have a lady do other obligations. Now, I'm going to tell you a very funny story, and maybe this is where it's coming from. When we had COVID, I was home working from home because I can't go to the hospital, and we were supposed to see patients from home. And I remember my husband was closed. He was not working, so he was with the kids. Kids had Zoom. We had homework. I'm downstairs in the basement, and I have a busy schedule of patients. And I have all these remote phone calls because, I had to work. And my husband cooked dinner for the first day. It felt great. Let me just tell you, that was like, oh my God, it's good to be in your shoes. Like, dinner is ready. Wow, I love it. I should have been a man. Like, I really, truly enjoyed it. I was like, this is good. First day, dinner was cooked. I ate. Psh, perfect. Second day, he's on Zoom phone calls. I'm downstairs working. My door is shut. I'm, doing my thing. Second day, dinner's cooked. Great life. It's really like COVID is working to my benefit. But let me tell you what happened on the third day. On the third day, dinner was not cooked. My husband was not happy because he was like, listen to me. I don't know how you do it, but I cannot juggle between kids, Zoom, homework, cooking. You got to choose. Am I cooking or am I doing this? Of course, I come and I say, well, what do you think I need to say? I got to juggle somehow. But the point of the story is there are other qualities that men can do. There are other qualities that ladies can do. It's not a fair statement to say, well, this is how it's supposed to be. And the reason I say it, because if everybody's going, if the most of the population is going to start thinking like, you know what, if your wife doesn't cook, well, maybe you should learn how to cook. But that may simply not be a man. First of all, it's not natural for a man to know how to cook. Some men know how to cook, but it's not natural. Not all men know how to cook. There might be men that know how to wash dishes, but not know how to cook, or vice versa. They're great cooks. Like my father makes the best cloth, but that's his specialty, but he may not be the best dishwasher. So everybody has certain things that they're good at and certain things that they're not good at. If we're going to now instill values on our spouse, which are not their norm, they can do something else, but they just can't do this. We're going to form toxic relationships. And what's going to be the next step? Well, let's have a boundary from them because, well, too bad. Why don't you learn how to cook? And what's going to be next? Let's get divorced because, well, why don't you help me? I am working, so why don't you go and get a cookbook and learn how to cook? Yes, he can. He may want to go out and buy something once or twice a week. He may make French fries if that's easy enough, or fry eggs. But at what point are we going to say, you know what? That is really not something he's able to do. Not because he's a bad husband, not because he's lazy. It was just not in his upbringing. He never had to do it at home. Because, yeah, we're living in culture where everything is equal, but there are still certain things that are pertinent to men, majority of it, and then pertinent to ladies. Now, whether or not you have kids or not, everything is going to start as a foundation of your marriage. So if the foundation is going to be set where we're now picking on each other to find problems, there's going to be a lot of toxic relationships. What do you think about that?
I do think every single family dynamic is so unique to itself. I think we get in trouble whenever we generalize.
Right.
Like for example, in my family, my wife is an accountant, so I've been married for a nice amount of time, thank God, and I haven't paid one bill in my whole relationship, right? So when my check comes, it goes into the bank, and my wife takes care of all the bills and all the payments, not because I can't do it, but she just does it better. This is her business. She's an accountant. She's great with budgeting. She's great with, the books and doing all of that. That's her specialty, right? Does that make me less of a man because I'm not the one who actually calls the utility company and pays all the bills and all that? No, I have other strengths in the house, and that's where I pitch in, and vice versa, right? To some, that can be very odd that she's the one, dealing with all the billing and doing all of that, but it works for my family dynamic. So this is a message to whoever is watching. Do what works, and this is a very important conversation to have with your spouse, to be able to say, what do we want out of this union? We want to have a happy, united, harmonious family, right? This is what we want. Okay, how do we get there? Also to recognize, and I said this before, to recognize in every relationship, there are three parts. There's three entities: the husband, the wife as individuals, the husband as an individual, the wife as an individual, and the couple, right? Which means to say, if the husband makes time out of his day to go and visit his mom, right? Of course, if it's not a toxic situation, if the husband makes time to go visit his mom and have a meal with her and have a sit down with her, and if it doesn't interfere in their relationship, let it go. Allow him to still have his own individual life. Stop calling him over and over and over and over again and getting under his skin and bothering him. Give him that space. Unfortunately, there's this concept of being so clingy and needy where spouses call on, where are you? Where are you coming home? Why are you still there? What are you still doing there, right? But also at the same time, now I'm saying that from one angle. Now I'm going to flip it on the other side, right? Which is, if your wife or your cooked a meal for you, and it's 7 o'clock, and dinner time is 7 o'clock, why are you eating dinner at 7 o'clock and coming home at 9 o'clock where the kids and the wife is waiting for you? So it's really, you have to really be mindful, and also just to be able to know, what are we doing in this life, in our family dynamic? We want to be able to live a healthy, happy life. So we have to make that work for ourselves, and also be okay with having your own individuality in the relationship. And it's not, tit for tat, like, I did this last time, now you have to do this. Now I did this, now you have to do this. It doesn't work like that. You're building an empire with your spouse, and kids see that. And whenever kids see harmony, where everybody kind of fills in the gaps and works together to make it happen, that's when they will continue that cycle and make it happen also. So it doesn't ring any alarms. It's not a red flag for me if the son wants to spend some time with his mom. Now, if he goes and spends time with his mom, and when he comes back, he now picks on the wife, why is this not done? Why did you do this? And why didn't you do that? That's a problem. That's when she's supposed to say, not blame him and not blame his mom, but just to say, I've noticed for this past week, when you come home from your mom's house, this is what I've noticed. I'm just curious to see, where is this coming from? What do you think? And just kind of put it out there and let that play in his mind and let him come to the conclusion himself where it's really coming from, right? Like, for example, if the house needs, if the wife, let's say, if the wife is working, the husband is working, and they say, the husband also has to chip in, or this one has to also, he has to help out in this kind of way, and he cannot do it for some reason, get a cleaning lady. There are so many again, in some cases, cleaning ladies can be a luxury, and in some cases, it's a necessity. Years ago, a lot of the times, women were not working. Life was different. Now that women, a lot of times, are working, and they're expected to come home and cook a meal and do all these different things, let's figure out a way. Also, planning is a big one. Whether it's meals, whether it's cleanup, whatever that may be. So setting healthy boundaries is an extremely, extremely important thing. For example, I'll give you a good one. A cleaning lady, okay? A lot of the time, if a woman is working full-time and has kids and is expected to make meals and do all of that and doesn't get time to get to the house, that's a boundary that she sets in her home to her spouse and say, we need to come up with a solution how we have the funds to have a cleaning lady once a week in the home. This is my boundary. I'm a person, I'm a human also, and I don't have the mental capacity and the physical strength to get to the nitty-gritty. Yeah, I'll tidy up here and there, but to get to the nitty-gritty, I don't have time. So let's make a way where we can have it. That is called a boundary, right? Or for example, sometimes women have this way of talking to their husbands in such a degrading way and putting them down and making them feel like garbage. That's not okay either.
And vice versa, too.
And vice versa. But we're talking about the men on this point, just to be able to say, and for the men to say, I don't appreciate you talking to me that way. I don't appreciate you speaking to me in a demeaning way, putting me down for no reason. Even not only with what you say, how you say it, and those eye rolls, those hand motions, things that, so this type of communication can build up and then also build resentment, and that's when you have a toxic relationship with one another.
I also will add, I also think everything you said, 100% agree. You said really good points here. I also think a lot of what we are dealing with is comparison. We compare our life to the life of other people. Like if we see other people live a certain way, or they have certain, ways of, let's say, who works, who pays the bills, when they go on vacation, which school they put their kids on, where they decide to live. And we now want to copy the life of others. Like, why do I have to work? My friend doesn't have to work. Well, why am I supposed to take out the garbage? My friend's husband takes out the garbage. When we start to portray our life based on the life of others, and that's why, when I see questions in general on social media, anywhere, it can be on my platform, it can even be on a discussion that we're having right now, it can be on a WhatsApp group, wherever you post a question, like a personal situation, it's really kind of scary because we don't know all the details that are surrounding this question. And by accident, we're going to now start giving advice without knowing the full details. Maybe, like, for example, let's go back to that question. Maybe the wife did cook and the man doesn't like it. He doesn't think it's good. He wants his mother's food. So as an excuse to say, I didn't make anything because now he wants to have a good enough of a reason to go eat by his mother, right? For example, or ask his mother for food. Or maybe she tried and it simply didn't work. Or she asked him, can you please buy something for me to make, let's say, French fries? She comes home and there's no potatoes. So how is she going to make the French fries? She asked him to go to the store and buy, and he didn't buy it. So there's no dinner that night. I mean, there's so many things that are surrounding a particular question that when we are asking forums or groups, even my own, like they sometimes give me anonymous questions, sometimes the answers can really be destructive. And that's where therapy does come into play. And that's where going to a doctor or any life coach, because they're hearing your whole story. They're hearing different sides. I mean, you can still skip certain things, but I'm saying you can ask questions to figure out what's happening. But when we start to post something and now the other person read the answer and she's also having such a similar thing in her house, we start to see a lot of toxicity. We start to see a lot of destruction. Like if we ask a question like, you know, is it okay for my mother-in-law to go and open the doors to my bedroom? Let's say it was never a problem for you. You never mind. You're like, whatever, let her feel like she's at home. It's her house, whatever. And then you saw somewhere where it said, no, what right does she have? What is her business? For example, by accident, a person can see something like that and change their dynamics all of a sudden and say, oh, so it's not okay? So why is she doing that? We have to be firm believers of what we live by. Like, stand by what you live by. If you really don't mind cooking and cleaning and taking out the garbage, and you really never minded it, stay firm on that. Don't try to imitate what the other world is doing around you and start to say, well, you know what, maybe this is the right way. Maybe I am taking so much upon myself. Because what's going to happen is you're no longer living by your values, by your standards, by your upbringings. You're trying to live by the values and standards of the world. And then what happens? Your husband or your wife is not happy with it, because once upon a time you were different when you went out, and that's when problems are going to start to arise. And then people wonder, well, why are we not having marriages last? I know I'm going on a tangent, but quick question before it's going to get too late. This is a very interesting one, Avi. Are you ready? Okay. Another toxic situation condition. Couple is getting married. This just came to me. The kudos, the new ones, are now at a table. Life didn't begin yet. The husband and wife are planning the wedding. One side decides to make a very rich, extravagant wedding because they have money, they have status, they have to prove themselves to people, whatever the situation may be. The other side doesn't have that ability. They don't see the point of it. They could care less about it. Now, there's no real agreement here, because what's the medium? Why am I asking this question? Not because it's about a wedding. Now, this new couple is not even married yet. There's already tension involved. There's already family, we could say, toxicity involved before marriage even started. So now when they somehow figure it out, how the wedding is going to come about, but all this left a negative taste in their mouth. Like, all this was not a good way to start the marriage. It already said some things like, oh, you're krachabor, you're cheap, you're this, you're that, your mother's like this, whatever. You know what I mean. Now we're starting the panel on a bad slate. So going forward, it's going to be like, oh, we got to, like, this is not a good relationship. I don't want your mother to come when my mother comes. I don't want your father to come when my brother comes, whatever the situation is. Is there a way to resolve this peacefully? Or now we're going to say, well, let's set a healthy boundary and let's not invite each other, because there's going to be toxicity here.
Actually, it's interesting you mentioned it, because recently, I'm not calling anybody out, but recently there was a wedding that was the case, where one of the family, they were very rich, and the other part of the family, they were not so rich. So the side of, let's just say, I don't remember which one it was, but let's say the husband's side was very rich. So for their side, actually, it was very interesting. Their side of the family, like all those tables, had like the expensive vodka and the expensive meals and all of that. And the other side, it was very interesting. And the other side of the family didn't have the expensive vodkas and expensive drinks. And I think the expensive side was like $350, and the non-expensive side was like $175 or $200 for the table. And you know what? That is a boundary. And that's a very healthy boundary. I know it might sound ridiculous, right? But why should the girl side of the family, who really doesn't have enough money and who's struggling, why should they now suffer because they're trying to please this side of the family? Why should they go into crazy debt and become sick from it because they want to just please and become equal to this side? That's not right. So what they said was, we can't do that. If you want to do that, by all means, you go ahead and do that. right? It's for their people, it's for their side, and they went ahead and they did that. Now, a few things might happen. This rich side might just say, you know what, yep, that's what we're going to do, right? That's one way. The second option might be to tell them, well, that's going to kind of look really, really weird. We're going to pay the difference for this side so it doesn't look weird, whether it's for the flowers or whatever it is. That's their decision. They don't have to do that. That's their decision if they're going to do it. Now, the third option is if this family starts making fun of that family and calling them that they're cheap and that they're, you know, that they don't care and all of those things, that's on them. They will start to make this whole mix up. And in the end of the day, it's because even though we have adults who we're dealing with, there's a lot of immaturity going on where they lose they lose sight of what's really happening here. A lot of the times when I work with clients and they're in the state of getting married, and this is what I do when I work with couples who are in the way of getting, and this stuff comes up, and then they have their wedding, and then they say, I can't believe this is what we were so panicking about. This is what we were so afraid of. It was a 5-hour event and it's gone just like that. And I spend months and months and months of worrying just to make both sides happy. Start also creating a boundary. If you have a husband and a wife, a couple, right? Two fiancés, right? They're in the relationship. And unfortunately, you're going to have background noise. Your family, his family, they're all going to make that noise. And if you guys love each other, just remember not to lose sight of what's really happening here. You're trying to build your own family, your own empire. Unfortunately, there will constantly be people who will give their comments, who will say their remarks. If you really love each other, learn to turn the volume down. That's what it is. Whatever it may be, you know, or even when you go out in public, when you go out to weddings and to restaurants and to when family members come over and they say certain things, learn to turn the volume down. There was an interesting, I don't remember who I heard it from, but there was an interesting way in order to build your relationship with your spouse. Spend 30 minutes every day. 30 minutes may be a lot. Spend 10 minutes every single day just giving some thought about how lucky you are to have your spouse and to think about all the positive things you love about your spouse. There's actually a book, and I did this with, you know, when I am together with my wife. This is a private thing, and even though, guys, I'm a therapist, and I've studied this. I've studied relationships. I've studied couples. I've read a lot of the research on how to build a healthy family. I do this myself. There was a book on Amazon. You guys can all buy it. I recommend that you buy it. It's called 101 Things I Love About You. Okay? And it's a book with so many random questions. Okay? It's an excellent book. When you go out for dinner, and this is a question, how you keep that spark alive, right? Let's say you go out with your husband for dinner, okay? And you want to make conversation. What do you guys really talk about? How was your work? How was your work? What did your sister say? What did your brother say? How are the kids? I'm really concerned for this kid. I'm really concerned for that kid. And you eat the meal, and that's it. You're done. So how do you keep the spark alive? How do you keep good conversation flowing? Sometimes we need help, and it's okay. I did this personally, and it was an amazing experiment I did. Go on Amazon, buy the book, 101. I actually bought it for my wife on Mother's Day. It was such an awesome experience. And we went out for dinner, and we brought a pen with us, and as we're eating the steak and eating, you know, the appetizers and all that, we were filling out the book. My wife was the one who was writing in it, but I was definitely answering, and she was answering, and this is how you keep that spark alive. Random questions. For example, when I met you, when I should have brought the book with me, but when I met you for the first time, I loved blank, but now that I live with you for this and this amount of time, I love this so much about you. You know, so just being able to see and keep that spark alive and see how much your love has grown, because guys, life is difficult. Life is stressful. There is so much that goes on in our day to day, if we don't do these things, we will burn out. That flame that we have, it will just naturally die down. It would not, think about it this way. If we don't work on something, if we don't invest, we're all so busy. There's so much, we're in traffic, we have, whether it's a boss or we have bills to pay, we have so much on our shoulders. And then when you go out, we're also exhausted. We sometimes need help, and it's okay to lean on certain books, certain games, certain different things that you can do to be able to help that relationship. And honestly, we weren't even able to finish like 10 pages. And you would
Wow,
think like
this is a lot.
there's simple questions like, what do you mean, right? We had a 4-hour dinner. We couldn't even finish 10 questions. You know why? Because every question ended up leading to a whole different conversation we never thought about. And we didn't talk about anybody else but just her and I, right? And the purpose of this conversation is not to talk about me. It's just to be able to say that you can do this too. And in the beginning, it can feel a little bit uncomfortable whenever I recommend this book to people. It's sometimes a little bit funny where they say, like, this is like weird. Why would I ask this? But once they start to do it, they absolutely love it. And many of them, I've recommended these games and these different techniques to couples. I have never received a bad response where they said that they did it and it didn't work and they didn't like it and it didn't improve their relationship. So if you want
I'm
to
gonna,
have
sorry, I'm gonna also add, I think also another very important boundary is never to allow somebody else to talk negatively about your spouse. Like
okay,
they may not like your husband or your wife for whatever reason. Let's say your mother or your father or his mother and his father has a certain projection. They don't like, let's say, the way that she talks to the kids or makes a certain food, or they just want to say something negative. If you even hear that, after a while, somehow it's going to go into their inner depths, and somehow it's going to really, like when you're in a bad mood and you start to argue, those words are going to come into play, and you're going to eventually, after many, many years, maybe by accident, believe in them. So never allow somebody to say anything negative about your spouse. As soon as your mother or your father or your sister or anybody starts saying, she's like this or she's like this, I'm so sorry, I have to go. Or I'm so sorry, but I really, really would appreciate if you don't talk that way about my husband or my wife. You got to be your spouse's biggest advocate. Even if you know the person is absolutely right, it is definitely something you've noticed yourself to be a negative flaw. But that's up to you as the spouse to handle that. That's not up to anybody else to give you their 5 cents about what they think is wrong with your partner. Because when you start to allow it, it's like you're allowing your people to throw garbage into your property, and your property needs to be fenced. Your property needs to be only for you. Your disagreements, things that you don't agree with, things that you know have to be worked on, it needs to be done privately. You go to an outsider who has no bias. They're not there to take sides. They're really there to help you. And that should be the only person that is giving you advice about how to deal with a particular challenge. But when there's bias involved, because the mother may take her son's side or the mother-in-law may take her daughter's side, there's always going to be a bias. Like, this is my child. I want to protect my child. And then we're going to have tension. And you know what else I'm going to add to that? If you have a fight between your husband and your wife, there's a fight, there's something going on, don't call your parents about it. Because today you're fighting. You said, my husband really hurt me. He yelled at me, or he didn't buy me a birthday gift. He never does it to me, blah, 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 blah. Whatever the case may be, tomorrow you guys made up. You guys are living a happy, good life together. But you put that negativity into your parents' mind about your spouse while you're making up and living your beautiful life together. They're sitting at home worrying about their children's relationship, worrying about, oh my God, they're not getting along. I hope they're okay. And then when they start to see each other, it's not going to be from a friendly, loving space.
I
And I think that's important.
I wanted to just say, Angela made a very, very good point. Angela Razilova, I want to just read her comment. She said, absolutely, but with toxic people, there is no talking. They hate it. Some people don't want to grow. They want to see what they can get away with, and they hurt people that care for them. I think what Angela is talking about is a narcissistic person. A narcissistic person really doesn't have any empathy, doesn't care about hurting your feelings. They're all about themselves and what makes them happy. They don't care to hurt you. They always say that your success, everything you have is because of them, and they make themselves that they are the most important ones and constantly make you feel like you're crazy and there's something wrong with you and you're less than. Now, it says with toxic people, if you dare set a boundary, they will raise the pain. And exactly, with you cannot change a narcissist. And it's very difficult to live with a narcissistic person. And that's why a few things is happening. With narcissism, it's extremely important to set a boundary. And if you do not set a boundary, it can completely overwhelm your life. And it's almost like you're sacrificing your life. And some people either stay in the relationship and it's almost like they're living their own identity. And a lot of the times their narcissistic partner cannot handle it. And they get even more and more and more emotional. That's the one thing that happens. Or the second one is the relationship does not end up working out because it becomes very unhealthy. If you're living with a toxic, abusive, manipulative, narcissistic person, it's a game changer. And this is why I said this live, it was very general, but mental illness is a very real thing. I'll say it again. Mental illness is a very real thing. And it's not just that they weren't raised right or something, they're trying to be controlled. Mental illness is something that can destroy families if the person does not want to work on themselves. But more so, if you're living with a narcissistic, controlling, manipulative spouse, you 100% need to set boundaries, need to set healthy boundaries and know what your values are. If you do not know what your values are, there's no way for you to be able to set a boundary. For example, physical abuse, okay? There are women who will go back to an abusive relationship and they'll appear like they're okay with it. Even sometimes if, let's say, infidelity, if there's cheating involved, right? Sometimes people will say, okay, they cheat, it is what it is, I'm fine with it, and they'll take their spouse back. That's their value. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. What I'm saying is that's their value. Some other people have different values that say, if my spouse cheats, I will never take them back. That is my deal breaker, right? Some people are fine with it, right? So depending on especially which culture and the older population, especially when you talk to them, a lot of them will say, yeah, he messed around and he cheated when he was younger, he did this and he did that. And it's almost like they normalize it, right? Some people are not comfortable with that. So you need to know what your core values are. A lot of the times people will go back to an abusive partner. And I'm not talking only about physical abuse. I'm also talking about verbal abuse and psychological abuse where they constantly make you feel like garbage. It's very important for you to be aware of this. Now, when this keeps happening, by being able to say, please do not talk to me this way. I am not comfortable with this. I will not, if you're going to continue talking to me like this, I will not continue to have this conversation. And if it does continue, stand up and leave the room. And see where that goes. And it's in the beginning, especially, they will make fun of you. They will pick on you. They may even explode even more. This is their way of testing their limitations. This is their way of testing your boundaries and how serious you are. They may poke fun. They may make you feel like you're crazy, that you're losing your mind. But this is the most important thing to be. I call it the broken record method. Stay on your boundaries and draw your line. Know your values, what you're worth. Everything has to come down to self-esteem and self-worth.
I like your points. I'm not a therapist, so you may not agree with what I'm about to say. But I'm not a therapist. I'm just going to talk from my opinion. I'm going to be very, very careful here because this is alive and this is definitely trending and this is going to be watched by thousands. And sometimes people just hear what they want to hear. And that's why I'm making this statement. Let's differentiate between somebody who makes you feel like garbage. Now let's differentiate that, just for argument's sake, just because we don't want to be the cause of any marital destruction. What Avi is saying is really for a person who really tries the best they can. Now everybody is going to everybody has a different meaning of I'm doing the best I can in a marriage, okay? If we're talking about a marriage in which the spouse, man, lady, is not bringing all they can to the table, they're not. Let's say a man sitting all day on the couch, doesn't do anything. He decided he doesn't want to do anything today. He doesn't want to get up. He wants to watch all day games. Or a lady, she doesn't want to do anything. Doesn't want to clean no laundry for days we're talking about. They're really, their responsibilities, which they agreed on, we're talking about the ones they agreed on, are not being met. And the spouse gets frustrated to the point of they start to demand things because they're exhausted from having a life where there's no partnership. Let's be careful, because we can by accident say, oh, then my husband is a narcissistic because he's controlling me.
So
He
also,
wants to take control of my life. What we're saying is not in those situations, because I've heard people that called me, and that's why I'm saying, like, sometimes when the partner gets very frustrated, it may appear that the partner is narcissistic and becomes controlling, and it's never okay. But at what point is the partner going to sit quiet, sit quiet, sit quiet, sit quiet? It comes to the point where they are exhausted from repetitive behavior. I'm sorry. Let me just finish my thought. The second thing is, there is also a difference in the way we ask something to be done and the way we communicate. Now, the problem is, let's, for argument's sake, I'm a lady, so I'm going to say it from a lady's perspective. And most ladies will not agree, whatever. They always say men are the head, ladies are the neck. Whichever way you turn the head, the neck, the head will go. Ladies do have a tremendous power, more than they think. Avi, believe me, your wife has a lot of power. It's just a gift that ladies have, okay? They have the power of speech. If you really truly do approach a man, and again, we're not generalizing anything, we're just saying, common situations here, we're not the uncommon situations, and you really ask him in a way where you become like, you got to know how to get the man to listen to you. You get creative. You're going to see things are going to become different in your life. There is a way of talking.
But that's exhausting. That's exhausting.
It's not exhausting.
No, but I'm saying to tiptoe around your spouse, to think like, okay, how am I gonna address the situation? It almost sounds a little bit manipulative.
No, I'll give you an example, okay? It's not so exhausting.
Okay.
If the person lives with their spouse, they almost know the personality of the spouse. Like, you live enough to know the personality of your spouse. And I'm not, again, please don't get offended if you're the minority, which this is not referring to, okay? Do not get offended, because there are divorces that really happen because there was no other way about it. This is no judgment here. I'm just talking for the majority, okay? We want to try to prevent divorce. We're saying, if you want a marriage to last, it's not exhausting. For the sake of peace, sometimes we have to do things. Like, for the sake of peace, it's okay to be exhausted, because the end result is it's going to be a peaceful day. It's going to be a peaceful night. So I'd rather get a little exhausted and get creative. Let's say, I'm going to give an example. You went out and you spent $500 buying yourself clothing. You know this is going to become a problem. Like, it's not acceptable, but it happens.
1 second. Why is that going to be a problem? Why?
Because let's say you already had this conversation before, you're financially in debt, you were asked to please not spend money, and you again went and you did it. I'm just giving that stupid example. Look at the other example.
I have 1,000 questions, but okay.
Okay, now, if a man says, why did you do that again, and gets upset and starts to get very upset about it, when they've already had conversations where they were already said, this is not good for us. It's very, very not a good timing. Like, don't overspend. Just because he goes off, I'm not defending, no man should go off and become abusive, but we have feelings. We cannot classify everybody who starts to now get upset and start to be acts like they're controlling as a narcissistic person. That's not what narcissism is about. There's also something called, we are married, we have We need bonds. We have to do things together. If we've already discussed that this is not good, I'm not narcissistic for trying to take control of our marriage. I'm trying to be realistic.
Yeah.
And when people start to define narcissism as just like being controlling, not necessarily, because sometimes you have, and like you just can't take it anymore. It's exhausting when the spouse, whether it's your husband or it's your wife, so many times you try to have a conversation, you try to make yourself understand that this is good or this is bad, and please don't go out late. Please, if you do go visit your mother, go by all means, but please come home early enough to help me put the kids to sleep. I mean, certain things, you've been through it so many times, and the person is not in agreement, then you know what? Then you need to go and get help. You don't get help like, oh, get me out of this marriage. I have an abusive relationship. Now I gotta, like, he's controlling my life. No, you get help into trying to understand, why is there friction there? Why? Maybe we are guilty of doing things which are causing problems. No?
So there's a few things that I have to say, and I'm going to take it back a few steps. When you were talking about the husband is sitting on the couch all day and the wife is getting annoyed, or vice versa, the wife is home all day and she's not doing anything. If you really think about this, in a healthy life, people naturally want to be productive, right? It doesn't feel good. Fine. Even think about it this way. When was the last time you had a COVID time? Perfect. You know, people were losing their mind. The first week, they loved it. Second week, awesome. After a while, many people said, I'm losing my mind because I can't just sit on the couch and do nothing. Naturally, people want to be productive. So if the husband is sitting on the couch and doing nothing, or the wife is sitting home and doing nothing, that sounds, and I'm not here to diagnose anyone, but that sounds like a form of depression, right?
Exactly.
And depression
Exactly.
is real. A lot of times people can confuse laziness with depression, but depression is a very real mental illness. And maybe that person feels numb and doesn't want to do anything because they have no drive. They're completely numb. They don't see the benefit of tomorrow. A lot of people don't want to wake up the next day. They have no drive. They have no motivation. They have nothing getting them to get up and go to work or just be productive. And these people need help. So it may look like they're lazy and that they're no good and they don't care and they don't want to do anything. But in reality, these people are in pain. That's one concept. The second concept, you talked about, the lady goes out and she buys something for $500 and now she has to find a way to,
Because she messed up.
because she messed up, fine. She messed up, then she has to take ownership and come to her husband and say, listen, I know we didn't have the funds for me to go to the store and spend this $500. Honestly, I really, really wanted this. I loved it. I fell in love with it. We're not going to have this anymore. This was the final sale. Let's figure out a way how either I can bring this $500 into the family budget, or let's figure out a way how next month we can take away something so it won't really affect our life. So it can affect our life. And this is something very, very important,
What's the other way of saying it, as opposed to? Let's do the as opposed to conversation. That's the nice way of saying it,
as opposed to manipulating him and trying to dance around him so he doesn't.
I work, I can do whatever I want, which again depends on your situation.
But that is true.
I know that, but that's what happens when we start talking like that. It's almost like we create problems, of course. But if you're in a marriage, right? Marriage is a partnership. Of course, everybody has their personal, some people say we have separate bank accounts. Great, that's your marriage. It works for you. Some people say we have a joint bank account. But when we start to use certain terms in our marriage, those terms are breakable terms. Because if we're going to start saying, well, I do this, I could do this, well, I can go, then what's the point of partnership? Marriage is a partnership. You might deep down know that you work. Well, it's true, you do work. But if you say that particular statement at that particular time, that's going to be a destructive statement.
I hear you.
That's what I'm saying.
I hear you, but I very much see marriage as really as equality, really, and specifically when it comes to finances. Unfortunately, in many relationships, the spouses, you'll be surprised, but many men also have to hide purchases from their wives because the wives will question them. Why did you buy that? You don't need that anymore. How many times can you buy that? Why did you do that? And men, you know how embarrassing and demeaning this is for a man to be questioned by his wife how much and why he's spending money and what he's doing? It's humiliating, right?
That's an
So
ego problem.
I hear that, but also you don't want to be questioned. Same thing with a woman. If you're both working, you're bringing in the finances, and you're sharing the pot. You have one bank account, and you feel like, again, the girl is not a bimbo. Unless she has a bipolar disorder where money, and that's also a thing. That's also a thing where women will go and spend money as a form to deal with their own issues. That is absolutely one of the characteristics of bipolar disorder, to be able to spend money without having any sense of limitation, right? Being reckless. So that's also another concept. People don't recognize that, but that's a big problem as well. So if this girl went without thinking, going and spending $500 or whatever it is, then coming home and thinking everything is going to be okay, and if it happens over and over and over and over again, this should be called out, not in a way to say, oh, I'm going to punish you or I'm going to now, be aggressive towards you, but just to say, look, this is what I've noticed. Over and over again, you've been going out and making these purchases. What's going on here? We're trying to save up. We're trying to pay, getting these loans or whatever it is, these payments. What's happening here? And open up the space, and possibly at that time, the woman would say, you know what? I'm sorry, I didn't notice it really had an effect on us. I have to take it back a notch. And also be more mindful. Now, if it becomes a problem, it's more serious. And that's where really she needs therapy.
Look at my husband to say something. He knows a woman like that. I wonder who that woman is.
Yeah.
Guilty. Well, I'm guilty as charged. Maybe that's why I used that particular example. But seriously speaking, if we know something we did was wrong, and we really, like I said, it's not exhausting. We know we're wrong. That particular day, just say you're right. I messed up. I'll try to be better next time. But don't right away. I mean, again, I can't tell people what to do. I'm just telling you what I think we should do. If we right away start to he's controlling, he makes me miserable, he's this, he's that, and we start to reshift this, it becomes like I'm living in a very toxic marriage. I'm living in a bubble. So what am I supposed to do? I better get myself out of this bubble, which is true in cases which are happening all the time. It's like choking. It's no fun in that relationship. But in majority, if your marriage is for the most part a nice marriage, you have children, you have good times, let's work on building our relationships first. And then thinking about how do we create boundaries from our relationships. I'm talking about spouses here, about sister-in-laws or mother-in-laws or brother-in-laws, which are not directly in your own family between your four walls. Yes, the priority should be your inner well-being. The priority should be always peace over anything, for sure. Do not give yourself an extra burden and have to deal with somebody's heavy weight right now that it's not necessary. That's different. That always strives to have no toxicity, boundary at all costs. But in a marriage, my suggestion is try the best you can to first come to a term of peace. Not right away, this is toxic, I'm done with this marriage.
Boundaries doesn't only have to be created when there's toxicity. It's not, it's something that really, that's the glue that keeps the unit together. Zalman is something special. We can't live with them. We can't live without them. So the most important thing is also we don't want to forget to have respect for one another. When we set up boundaries, it's always done with respect and always how you feel, not accusing the other person, not putting the other person down. A lot of times people feel like when they set a boundary, they now have to become aggressive. It's not aggressive. It's about being assertive. Respect is very important. Absolutely. And we have some
yeah, we're gonna wrap up, so please give us your last comments because Avi's gonna read them.
There's some comments here that says, let's see. Usually, this one was from Mariana. Usually, a narcissist will never accept blame or acknowledge causing pain. A narcissist has zero empathy or sympathy. They refuse to accept and responsibility. They are usually CEOs. Well, I hear that. You will see a lot of CEOs have narcissistic characteristic traits. Now, unfortunately, this is what it is, that they have no empathy. They don't show any empathy. They really don't care for your feelings. So if the person now, like what Yocheved said, we don't want to now start labeling every single person who's just being assertive as a narcissist. We have to be very careful. And unfortunately, we're very in society now. We're all about labeling people left and right, left and right. That's not what the point is here. However, a narcissistic person, it's extremely difficult to live with a narcissistic person, and life feels very exhausting. So if that person is a narcissist and you live with a narcissist where your relationship is exhausting and you constantly feel like you're in the corner and you constantly feel like you're walking on glass, like you're tiptoeing just not to affect that person, go get therapy for yourself so you can learn how to deal with a toxic person. Learn everything. Even when couples are dating, I still tell them when we have session, I say, absolutely, you want to set those boundaries. Set those boundaries with each other, with how you speak. But even saying the word stupid to your spouse, oh, you're so stupid, right? That's a boundary. That's crossing a boundary. It's not supposed to be done. So in the beginning of your relationship, to say, we don't talk like that to each other, even as a joke, because once you cross that boundary, it can get further and further and further. So that's when you set these limitations to your relationship, that's when you can actually have a healthy relationship. Let's look at the other
Yes,
comments.
Benjamin, I agree with you. They should be labeled as a narcissist by somebody professional. It is a diagnosis. It's a personality disorder,
Yeah.
which does need an evaluation by a specialist. So we don't label people. There's questionnaires, there's questions that are asked, there's criteria. So any kind of psychological disorder, it's not like, oh, she's depressed. There's questions that are asked. It's not like somebody has bipolar disorder or somebody has, narcissistic personality traits. Absolutely right, Benjamin. They need to be evaluated by a professional for that diagnosis.
Mariana actually said a very good point, and she said in a couple there has to be 3 accounts, 3 bank accounts, his, hers, and family. And I agree with you 100%. And let me share from a personal experience. Like I mentioned, my wife, when we got married, we opened up a joint bank account, like many people do. And because she was the accountant, she was the one paying the bills. So when I wanted to buy something, I found myself having to call her and say, hey, I need to make a purchase. Can I make a purchase? Did you already send the check? Did you already pay the bill? Did you already do that? Do we have enough funds for me to get whatever it is that I need? And I noticed I had to constantly almost like check in with her before I made a purchase. And honestly, that was exhausting. I didn't want to have to constantly do that. And it was interesting because even if I would want to buy her a gift, she would see what I buy for her because it's in the statement, right? So how do I even surprise her with anything? Because she was always on top of it. So guess what I did? I said, you know what? In order for me not to have to constantly check in with you and say, can I buy this? Can I buy that? Do we have enough funds for this or that? I created a 3rd account, another a completely separate account, and that account is for the basic needs that I need for my personal stuff, right? So we have a family account that goes out of there, and then a personal account that is just for my own needs, where I have that own security to say, if I want to go buy something extra, if I want to go do something, I can do that. And same thing for women, to be able to have the same thing as well, where if you want to go shop for $500, you can do that without feeling that guilt or that fear that, oh, now I have to tiptoe.
Yes, if I'm gonna say, Avi, if you both know that you're not in a situation where you're very tight, where things are like you have very, very important bills like mortgages to pay, for sure. Everybody's entitled. Like, I'm a working woman, so I'm not talking about from a place of, I'm dependent. I do work. I do have a career, I do make a salary, but it's unfair for me to decide, like certain things we do have to be like respectful. For some people, designer stuff, it's be respectful of your marriage like values. If in your marriage, it's okay, like you both decided, you know, designer items are great to have, that's great. But it's going to cause a lot of tension and restrictions in your marriage because of it. You got to risks versus benefits. Like, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? And to each his own. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm looking through the comments.
Arson, especially for women, you must have a separate account. Really? That's a nice husband to say that. You're really. So you must have a separate account.
Wait,
Who's funding that account?
what was the comment?
He says, especially for women, you must have your separate account. But let's say the woman is not working. She's sitting home watching the kids. Who's funding that account? The separate one.
No, I hear that, you know, but also even for there, if she's home, why? But it's so there's so many different levels to that question, you know, to that statement. If she's home with a newborn, you know, and obviously she needs things, of course she's going to use the family account. But I agree with him that, you know, yes, for a working woman, she absolutely needs to have her own account also, to be able not to feel like she constantly has to ask for every little thing, to ask for permission. The woman absolutely needs to have money in her wallet. The man needs to have money in his wallet. That's how it has to. That's how it has to be in order for there to be peace and equality.
If she's working, but if she's not working, then they have to have a discussion again, if finances permit, because we're living in a time where everything is very expensive. Sometimes finances are so tight that unfortunately there are instances where the man cannot give another $200 or $300 on a monthly basis to fund that account, not because he's a terrible husband, because finances are not permitted.
It's not about funding the account. It's not like it's saying, you know, at the end of the month there has to be money, you know, deposited into that bank account. But if she needs something and she's home watching the kids, just finding a way not to make it hard for her. Obviously, there's no money and she wants $2,000 shoes. Obviously, we're not talking about that.
When he writes, I mean, if she works, she must have her own account, but a husband and you should be able to view account and have transparency. I agree with that.
Sure, I hear that, but I don't know, it just makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable if my spouse would say, let me look at your account, let me see what you've been buying. Sure, you want to do it, go ahead, but it's a little bit, it gives me a little not a good feeling. I don't know.
Really?
Am I alone? What do you guys think? Is it weird? Is it strange? I just find it a little bit strange if your spouse says, "Let me look at your private account and see your purchases." I find that to be a little bit odd. But I want to say transparency should be there, but
Right.
not in a way where you need to feel like you're being put under the microscope.
No.
Let's see.
I like Arson's response. He said her funding is the credit card. Wow. I love that. Okay. That's unlimited there. Very nice.
Let's see, so you and you should
How
know.
long
Okay.
are we alive? It seems like
Okay,
we've been
awesome.
alive for a long time already.
Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Great conversation, great topic. Thanks for all the comments. What do you guys think about creating healthy boundaries? Let us know. Let us know what we should talk about in the next topic. Yocheved, what are your last closing statements?
Last closing statements. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought this live was very, very, it was a lot of fun. I have to say, it was a fun live because,
Yeah.
you know, life it has, you know, ups, downs. There's problems here, problems there. There's good moments. It's very, very, when you look at it in this way and you can laugh and smile about the problems we have, then they're not problems anymore. So I thoroughly enjoyed today's show. I think that it was very helpful for me personally. It was very therapeutic. It's nice. It's a good discussion. So if you enjoyed it, everybody who's watching, if you guys enjoyed it, please share it with others.
Yeah.
We always welcome your feedback. We
For
will
sure.
try to make a poll. We'll try to do this poll thing. I think it works when we give them the topic suggestion.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. All right, guys. Have a good night. Yocheved, it's been real. Take care. Until next week.
Have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.